Once upon a time, there once was a man who roared like a lion and cried like a baby. His name was Stephen.
I hate it when Swipey Swipe stores goodies.
Yo, Stephen, let's go get some food, my man.
All right, dog. Is it me, or does the air seem kind of different over here?
Yeah, I think it's because of the factory over there. It's letting out all these air pollutants. Jerks.
We can't stand for this. We need to do something.
What do you plan to do, Stephen?
What else can we do except burning them down?
Alright, so over here we got PG&E where they build a power plant in Hunter's Point, San Francisco, which emits about 600 tons of pollutants every single year to the southeast region of San Francisco, and 600 tons is a really big amount. And so we might ask ourselves, why did they build a power plant with a population of nearly 36,000 people compared to a place like Colma, which only has 1,800 people and also a lot of resources available to power plants?
Though a place like Colma is 15 minutes away from the city, with a large amount of megawatts being transmitted, the amount of voltage being lost is minimal.
With the already great amount of air pollution in San Francisco, the dispersal of air pollution should be obvious. With that in mind, alternative locations should be erected.
So they took truckloads, well, I shouldn't say truckloads. They used trucks, but they railroad cars full of that soil that they took out of here that was polluted with various, hydrocarbons and whatnot that you find it, this is a gas-fired power plant, old nasty one, and inefficient. And that got carted away to make it somebody else's toxic problem instead of using bioremediation techniques, right? We have lots of evidence to show, even the Naval Shipyard up here, rumor has it, that they're using fungi for some of the radioactive soil. So we have plants, we can use fungi, we can use species of bacteria to clean up. They didn't do any of that. That so makes me mad. And you can see their nasty transformers still there, right? That's all there.
Yeah.
And so what did they do? They didn't even, if they had actually went off on somebody who came here last week that worked on that project, he probably thinks I'm such a witch. But anyway, so you'll notice there's a brown strip around it.
Yeah.
That's their bioswale, right? So that was supposed to be to absorb any runoff of that ugly asphalt. Well, they should have just used bioremediation the whole time. They planted that in the dry season. So what happens when you plant a native plant in the dry season? You don't water it. It dies, right? So you'll see a nice brown strip, I'm being facetious, all the way around it is the dead bioswale. So that was their attempt at greening the infrastructure. So I totally went off on that in the tour, and I didn't know somebody from PG&E was here. And they started emailing me saying they were very concerned about it and wanted to do something about it, and that they wanted to involve my students, and they're trying to fix the problem. And I thought, good. They're all for some money. Anyway, so that's what I know about that plant. It's gone. That's good. How they remediate it was not a good thing.
Okay, so we just have simple questions
Yeah.
How long have you been working in this area?
Well, I was born and raised not far from here, so I'm from
okay.
Ventura Hill, and
So you lived here all your life?
yeah. I've lived abroad for a while, but for the most part, this is where I'm from.
So over the years, have you noticed anyone working in this area or someone you know that have developed respiratory problems?
Well, I used to work as an environmental toxicologist, right, in the field of environmental health, so I know that there's lots of problems like that because it's in the literature and documented that this area has higher rates of respiratory disease, particular asthma, and a lot of that has to do with, well, you look outside, you can see sustainable crushing and all the particulate matter from that. The larger stuff, right, our respiratory system able to filter out the small things. So the power plant was probably the biggest culprit. But freeways, you got all kinds. This is the industrialized part of the city. So this is in the environmental justice issue section of town.
And have you noticed any change in the air quality over the years in this area?
Yes and no. It's gotten better, I think. However, what irritates me, being a scientist or trained as a scientist, is that we need to have data to verify that, right? And there haven't, all the studies that I've seen done on this area are old. They're late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
That's old. It's 2013. We need a new study. And one of the things I'm hoping that will happen is at City College, we just got a Department of Labor grant to actually establish an environmental monitoring program. So I'm hoping that what I'm trying to create is some service learning opportunities in that. So I actually would like the students, when they're learning about air monitoring, that they actually come here and start collecting some data. And maybe what we can do is look at that data and compare it to whatever data exists in the past, so we can answer that question more appropriately, rather than just me flapping my lips to the breeze. Anyway.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
So, we're just going to ask you a few quick questions. So, how long have you been living in the city?
25 years.
25 years. So, do you, come here often a lot?
Yeah, I live right in the Bayview, 2 miles away.
All right, that's great. So,
It's real convenient.
just a random question. Do you know anybody, does anybody in your family, or have you been affected by asthma?
Yeah, my son has that.
So, basically what we came here for was the power plant that was been taken down a long time ago. And we were wondering if you think that the air has been affected because of the power plant in this area.
Yeah, I think it was back in the day. Hopefully it's getting a lot better now. But I know I was here to go along a lot of this part before, 10 years ago. It was really pretty nasty all along here.
So do you think living in the Bayview has contributed a negative health factor rather than other areas in the city because of the power plant?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the people that are right here, I think we're a couple miles over and the wind comes from the west, I don't know. But I think it kind of sits in around here, and I think, I don't know, I haven't looked at the facts, but
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, sir.
that's all.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
The blood, sweat, and tears of an organization called Literacy for Environmental Justice. I don't know if you know these guys. So this is an organization that's been around since the late 90s, and their mission was basically to empower youth and others in the community about the environmental justice and health issues and injustice issues in the community. Because you guys know, if you're taking AP Environmental Science, that all environmental issues are environmental justice issues, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, I got to have the good fortune to be here with my students. So I teach environmental science at City College.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And
Oh, wow.
I also teach a class, and I created a certificate program together with my colleagues called Applied Research, called the Sustainability Certificate Program. But the class that's you're required to take in order to get that certificate is called Applied Research and Sustainability. So my students that have already taken alternative energy, environmental science, environmental monitoring, they've come here and they've helped me take care of this place, which is pretty amazing. So I said, we're off the grid, so the only input into the building is water from the city to the sinks and the toilets. We're working with, the government agencies to get our work plumbed. Actually, right now I could be a bad girl and I could flush the toilets with the water we collected we have 3 4,800-gallon tanks out there. This first one out here that you saw when you came in, just on the immediate left of the front door, that one collects water from the metal part of the roof where we have solar panels. That water we can use to flush the toilets, and we're hoping that once we can get that permitted, we're working with bureaucrats, that takes time. And the other 2 tanks drain our living roof. So we have a living roof planted with native plants. Why do we have, what's the purpose of having a living roof? What are some things that are cool about having a roof? With native plants in particular.
It's on the roof?
It's on the roof.
So the soil?
Right, so it's going to have insulating properties, right? We've got soil and plants up there, right? And they're going to absorb moisture and the evapotranspiration of plants that's going to be released back to the atmosphere. That's also going to help with mitigating against the urban heat island effect, right? So, and also we have native plants, so we're restoring some of the habitat from the land cover change that happened when we built this building. And we also have the fact that we help to collect stormwater, right? Or rainwater, once it hits the ground or a surface, it's stormwater. So we're restoring some semblance of normalcy to the water cycle. And that water drains into these other 2 tanks here that are just outside. And so the roof takes care of itself. In the dry season, we pump that water back up there a couple times a week to water it. And so all water that falls on the site is managed by us in some way. Explain that. We've got pervious paving out there. It's also light colored, so it reflects the sun's radiation, so that helps mitigate the urban heat island effect. We've got native plants everywhere, so that is all absorbing that water, and also because they're native and adapted to this place, we don't have to water them. Right now we're watering some of them because they just went in, so you have to take care of them for the first season or two. And we had a particularly bad winter, right? We didn't have much going on there. So all the electricity we use is produced on site. Up on the rooftop, comes down right outside here. You might see there's a big metal container, looks like a freezer in your grandma's house. That contains 16 batteries that are charged and discharged. And we got this room back here. You can walk in there and have a look before you leave. There's what's called a charge controller and inverter. So the energy produced on the roof comes into the charge controller. That goes out, charges the batteries. When we need it, comes back in the building. And we also have battery storage because we're off-grid, right? We're not connected to the electrical grid. All those big nasty transformers and lines out there, we don't have any of that here. It's just produced up there, comes down here, comes into the building. You can see some of the conduits here. So the decision was made, let's let people see where their electricity is traveling, from and to the powers, the loads that it powers. And we have some art you'll have to walk through. But the coolest thing about this building is we also treat our wastewater on site. So everything down the sinks and the toilets, and yes, I did say toilets, gets treated, goes into a pump underneath. There's a plywood plank out there, you can see. That gets pumped into the other room. There's a settling tank. There's two big tanks. Those are just septic tanks. Usually those are buried under the ground. We have them up so you can see them.
Oh, okay.
So settling tank, that's called primary treatment. Like the name implies, solids settle out. Yucky, greasy stuff on top, right? Effluent goes through. Okay, you know all that stuff. Then we got a recirculation tank. That's aerobic breakdown. Remember all the bacteria in there doing work for us. We donate it, right, when we use the bathroom. And then that actually recirculates. And there's these films that the bacteria grow on. It's actually, they form films on what look like, they're just synthetic wool towels. And water recirculates through that, so every time we do that, that's another opportunity for those bacteria to capture any of the inorganic and organic matter in it. And then it gets zapped, passes a UV lamp, gets zapped, so we have tertiary treatment on site. We actually have somebody comes and an environmental monitoring lab, my colleague's lab, comes and tests that water every week, and we meet EPA recreational water quality standards. So you could swim in it. You probably swam in nastier stuff in a lot of this, the country's lakes and rivers, but ours is pretty good. And then finally, the thing that's really cool, you have to go in there and check it out, we have a constructed wetland.
Wow.
And so constructed wetlands were first used back, experimentally in the 50s in Germany. We started to build them around the world, but in this country in the 70s, the first one was in Arcata, California. And so we're trying to mimic the processes of nature, in this case wetlands, to further treat the rainwater. And you guys all learned about algal blooms and eutrophication and all that, right? So one of the things that conventional wastewater treatment doesn't do is it doesn't absorb, or doesn't break down and absorb most of the nitrogen and phosphorus, maybe about half the nitrogen, but not the phosphorus compounds. When we send that out into waterways, it causes algal blooms and eutrophication and dead zones or toxic tides, all that kind of stuff.
You learn all about this.
Yeah, and so it filters pollutants, even though we can't test this here. Hopefully we don't have a whole lot of toxic substances going down the toilet, but who knows? I don't know what kind of people are coming and bringing in here. But, we've had lots of peer-reviewed studies to show that when we mimic nature, plants can absorb and lock up some of those pollutants. They can store it and lock it up in the sediments, and they'll stay there as long as we don't mess with it. So yeah.